Everyone says housekeepers are invisible. They're wrong. Here's why. My hands were shaking as I stepped into Seoul's most exclusive criminal gala, knowing that every billionaire in that ballroom was waiting for me, the American housekeeper, to prove I didn't belong. But here's what nobody tells you. The moment you stop apologizing for existing is the moment you become unforgettable. And Kang Seo-jun, the man who'd bet 20 billion won on my humiliation, was about to learn that the hardest. Stay with me, because in the next 50 minutes, I'm going to show you exactly how I went from invisible employee to the woman who brought Korea's criminal elite to their knees. Not with violence, not with money. With something far more dangerous, dignity that refused to break. If you love stories where the underestimated woman steals the show and melts the coldest heart, subscribe now, because this romance is about to get dangerously addictive. Before I tell you about the night that changed everything, you need to understand the mistake I made 2 years earlier, the one that cost me everything I'd worked for, and the one that somehow led me to him. But wait, let me take you back to where the real story begins. Not the gala, not even Seoul. A private lounge on the 72nd floor of Mirai Tower, where 5 of Korea's most dangerous men were about to make a wager that would destroy me. Or so they thought. Kang Seo-jun sat at the head of the obsidian table like a king presiding over his court of wolves. At 33, he'd earned his reputation not through brutality, but through something far more terrifying: absolute precision. They called him the architect because he designed empires, while others merely destroyed them. But here's what I didn't know that night. He'd been watching me for months, noticing things about me I thought I'd hidden perfectly. Park Tae-min swirled his whiskey, his voice dripping with condescension. The Eclipse Summit is in 3 days. Tell me you're not planning to arrive alone again like some monk taking a vow of celibacy. What happened next would set everything in motion. But first, you need to understand what these men really wanted. It wasn't about the money. It was never about the money. It was about power. And proving that people like me, people who worked for a living, who didn't inherit their worth, would always be beneath them. Choi Hyun-woo leaned forward, his inherited arrogance practically glowing. Every syndicate boss in the peninsula will have someone on their arm. You'll look weak, vulnerable. Seo-jun's expression remained carved from ice. I don't recall asking for romantic advice from men who treat women like interchangeable accessories. Kim Jae-sung, the eldest and cruelest, suddenly smiled. That's when I knew, even though I wasn't there yet, that my life was about to change. I have an idea, a wager. Here's where it gets crazy. Bring the housekeeper to the Eclipse Summit, Jae-sung continued, and I can imagine the predatory silence that followed. Dress her up, parade her around like she belongs in our world. I'll personally donate 10 billion won to your foundation if you can get through the entire evening without her exposing herself as exactly what she is, a terrified servant completely out of her depth. Here's what nobody tells you about men like this. They don't bet on things they expect to lose. They bet on guaranteed humiliation because watching someone break is their version of entertainment. Taemin laughed. That's cruel even for you, Jae-sung. The poor girl would probably faint the moment she walked through the doors. But Seo-jun did something none of them expected. He raised the stakes. 20 billion, he said quietly, and I wish I could have seen their faces. When she handles the evening with more grace than any woman you've ever brought to these events, you'll donate 20 billion won, each of you. What he didn't know, what none of them knew, was that I was about to become someone even I didn't recognize. But wait. I'm getting ahead of myself again. If you've ever felt invisible, you'll understand this next part. For 2 years, I'd perfected the art of being present but unseen in Kang Seo-jun's penthouse. I knew his schedule better than his assistant knew it. I knew he took his coffee black at 6:47 a.m. sharp. I knew about the nightmares that woke him at 3 a.m., though he never acknowledged them. I knew the scar along his collarbone that disappeared beneath his shirts. I knew things I wasn't supposed to know. But knowing and understanding, those are completely different things. I wasted 2 years being invisible. Here's what works instead. Miss Williams. His voice cut through my thoughts like a blade that day, 3 days before everything changed. I turned to find him standing in the archway, still wearing his charcoal suit from his meeting. Even exhausted, he looked like he'd been carved by someone who understood symmetry and threat in equal measure. Yes, Mr. Kang? I need you to attend an event with me in 3 days. My heart stopped, because in 2 years of working for this man, he'd never asked me for anything beyond professional duties. And I had no idea this was the wager talking. I had no idea I was about to become entertainment for Korea's elite. But here's the thing, and this is crucial. Even if I had known, I think part of me would have said yes anyway. Here's what nobody tells you. Sometimes the cruelest thing someone can do is give you hope before they shatter it. The Eclipse Summit, a charity gala hosted by the Peninsula's financial elite. You'll accompany me as my guest. Guest, not employee, not housekeeper. Guest. The word felt like a door opening to somewhere I'd never been allowed to enter. Mr. Kang, I don't think I'm your housekeeper. Surely, there's been some mistake. There's no mistake. His tone allowed no argument, and I can still hear it in my head. The event begins at 8 p.m. You'll need appropriate attire. My assistant will arrange for a stylist tomorrow. But wait. Here's where it gets interesting, because I asked him a question that changed everything. Mr. Kang, am I being let go? He paused, his broad shoulders silhouetted against the city lights. And for the briefest moment, something unreadable crossed his features, something that should have warned me this was bigger than a simple invitation. No, Miss Williams, you're being elevated. Temporarily. Temporarily. That word should have been my first clue. The stylist arrived at noon the next day with enough garment bags to stock a boutique, and she said something that made my blood run cold. The Eclipse Summit isn't a charity gala. It's a display of dominance. Everyone who attends is connected to old money, political power, or both. I asked her the question that was burning in my mind. Then why would Mr. Kang want me there? Her answer changed everything. I went from invisible housekeeper to unforgettable in 36 hours. Here's how. Madame Choi circled me like a sculptor examining raw marble. You have beautiful bone structure, strong shoulders, the kind of presence that photographs well if styled correctly. Then she said something that would become my mantra for that entire night. Everyone thinks power comes from money and status. They're wrong. Here's why. These people can smell insecurity like blood in water, Madame Choi explained, adjusting my posture for the 50th time. You carry yourself like you're apologizing for existing. That ends now. I'm a housekeeper from Georgia, I protested. I can't just. You can. You will. Her eyes turned fierce, and I'll never forget what she said next. Whatever game Mr. Kang is playing, you didn't ask to be a piece on the board. But now that you are, you move like a queen, or you get sacrificed like a pawn, your choice. Here's where something inside me shifted. I thought about my mother, a woman who'd worked 3 jobs to send me to college, who'd taught me that dignity wasn't about where you stood in the world's hierarchy, but how you carried yourself regardless. Okay, I said quietly. Show me how to be unforgettable. Madame Choi smiled like she'd been waiting for exactly that response. Now we're getting somewhere. The next 36 hours became a blur of transformation, but it wasn't just about the gown or the makeup or learning how to walk in heels that cost more than my monthly rent. It was about something deeper, something that would save me when the truth came out. But I'm getting ahead of myself again. If you think looking expensive is enough to belong in that world, you're losing. Unless you know about the 3 rules Madame Choi drilled into me. 1. Posture is power. Shoulders back, chin, level. Move like the room should be grateful you entered it. 2. Silence is strategy. You don't need to fill every pause. Let them wonder what you're thinking. 3. Dignity is non-negotiable. The moment you apologize for existing is the moment they've won. I didn't realize it then, but these 3 rules would become my armor. Friday evening arrived with the weight of an execution. I stood before the full-length mirror in the penthouse's guest suite, barely recognizing myself. The gown wasn't what I'd expected. Deep burgundy silk that moved like water. A neckline that suggested elegance rather than seduction. A silhouette that emphasized my natural height and grace. My natural curls had been styled into an sophisticated updo. The makeup was subtle but transformative. I looked expensive, powerful, completely unlike the invisible woman who'd scrubbed floors for 2 years. "You look terrified," Seo-jun said from the doorway. I spun to find him devastating in midnight blue, and the way he looked at me in that moment. I should have known something was different. But I was too focused on my own fear to notice. "I am terrified," I admitted. "Good. Fear keeps you sharp. Just don't let them see it." Then he said something that should have been my second warning. "Here's what nobody tells you. When someone warns you about a battlefield, they're usually the one who armed your enemies. The Eclipse Summit isn't a party, Miss Williams. It's a battlefield where the weapons are words and the casualties are reputations. People will try to determine your value within seconds of meeting you." "Then why bring me?" I asked. "Why make me a target?" His pause lasted 3 seconds too long. "Because I made a wager, I intend to win." But wait. Here's the part that changes everything. "And because," he continued, something unreadable in his dark eyes, "because I'm curious to see if you're as strong as I suspect you are." I didn't understand what he meant then, but I would. Very soon. The car glided through the gates of the Jade Palace, and I pressed my palm against the window, watching the mansion materialize through gardens that probably required an army of groundskeepers. Seo-jun's hand settled at the small of my back. "Remember," he murmured, "you belong here as much as anyone else." The lie was so beautiful I almost believed it. Then the car stopped, and I saw them. A sea of Korea's elite, all turning to stare at the unknown black woman on Kang Seo-jun's arm. And I knew, this was going to be a massacre. 97% of people in my position would have crumbled within the first 5 minutes. Here's why I didn't. The whispers started the moment my heels touched marble. "Who is she? Never seen her before?" Certainly not from any family I recognize. But I'd been trained for this. Shoulders back, chin level, move like the room should be grateful. Then she appeared. The first test. Yoon-mi-sun, in a silver gown that probably cost more than a luxury car, stepped directly into our path. Her smile was poison wrapped in diamonds. "Seo-jun, how unexpected to see you with a guest." And that's when the interrogation began. Here's where it gets crazy. "I don't believe we've been introduced to your companion," she said, and the pause before companion was deliberate. Seo-jun introduced me with clinical precision. "Roxanne Williams. Miss Williams, this is Yoon-mi-sun." Then she asked the question designed to expose me. "How did you and Seo-jun meet?" Here's what nobody tells you. The truth, when delivered with confidence, is often more powerful than any lie. "We met through work," I said with perfect honesty. "I've had the privilege of seeing how Mr. Kang operates up close. It's been educational." I watched her recalibrate, watched her realize I wasn't going to play the game she'd set up. "And what is it you do, Miss Williams?" "I help maintain order in complicated environments." "What about you, Miss Yoon? Besides attempting corporate mergers, how do you spend your time?" Something dangerous flashed in her eyes, recognition that she'd just been matched move for move. As she glided away, Seo-jun leaned down. "Well played. She hates me now. She hated you the moment you arrived on my arm. At least now she also respects you." But the real test hadn't even begun yet. I wasted 30 minutes feeling proud of myself. Here's what I should have noticed instead. Two men approached, Park Tae-min and Choi Hyun-woo, the same men who'd been at the penthouse occasionally. "You actually brought her," Hyun-woo said, shock obvious in his voice. "I honestly didn't think you'd go through with it." The words landed wrong. Through with what? But wait. This is where everything I thought I knew exploded. "She cleans up well, I'll give you that," Tae-min said, his eyes raking over me with undisguised assessment. "Cleans up. Like I was a project. An experiment." "Thank you," I said, keeping my voice even despite the ice forming in my stomach. It's amazing what proper lighting and expensive fabric can do. Then Tae-min said the words that shattered my entire world. "You're not supposed to like her. You're supposed to watch her crumble under the pressure of trying to pretend she belongs here." The mask slipped. Just for a second. But enough. This wasn't Seo-jun bringing a date to an event. This was a test. A wager. A cruel game where I was the unwitting entertainment. I lost my dignity for 30 seconds in that moment. Then I learned this. I turned to look at Seo-jun, searching his face for some sign that I'd misunderstood. But his expression remained perfectly neutral. The architect. Calculating and cold. And I realized I'd been a fool. Of course this wasn't real. Of course, a man who moved through the world like he owned it wouldn't actually want my company. I was a prop. A pawn. A joke. Here's what I did next. And this is crucial because it's what saved me. "Excuse me," I said quietly. "I need a moment." I walked toward the terrace doors, my heels clicking against marble with the rhythm of a heart breaking in slow motion. Here's what nobody tells you. The moment you stop performing for people who've already decided you don't matter is the moment you become dangerous. The terrace was empty. Just me, the night air, and the distant sounds of Seoul below. I gripped the stone balustrade, trying to steady my breathing. "Miss Williams." I didn't turn. "Don't." But Seo-jun moved to stand beside me anyway. "You weren't supposed to find out." Those 6 words confirmed everything, and somehow made it worse. "Find out what?" My voice cracked. "That you made a bet with your friends about whether your housekeeper could survive a night pretending to be something she's not? That I'm here as entertainment? It's more complicated than—" "No." I finally turned to face him. "It's actually very simple. You used me." But wait. What he said next changed everything I thought I understood about this man. "You think I don't see you?" The rawness in his voice stopped me cold. "I notice everything about you, Roxanne Williams." My first name on his lips felt like lightning. "I notice that you hum when you think no one's listening, that you read poetry in 3 languages, that you've maintained your sense of self despite working in a world designed to erase people like you. This is where I went from victim to victor. Here's how." "Then why?" My voice broke. "Why turn me into a bet?" "Because I'm an arrogant fool who thought I could control every variable." His hand lifted as if to touch my face, then dropped. "Because when they mocked the idea of you belonging in their world, I wanted to prove them wrong so badly that I didn't stop to consider what it would cost you." He paused, something raw in his expression. "Because I'm very good at strategy and terrible at admitting when something matters more than winning." "You matter more than winning," he said quietly. And just like that, the game changed. "What happens now?" I asked. "Now you make a choice." His dark eyes held mine. "You can leave, or you walk back into that ballroom with me, and we show every person in there exactly what they're too blind to see, that you're more remarkable than any of them will ever be." Everyone says revenge is about destruction. They're wrong. Here's why. I took his arm and we walked back into that ballroom like we were claiming territory. This time, I didn't shrink from the attention. This time, I let them stare. But wait. Here's where the night took its final, most beautiful turn. Halfway through the charity auction, Huang Yuna, the matriarch hosting the event, took the microphone. Before the evening concludes, I wanted to acknowledge a particularly entertaining aspect of tonight's gathering. My stomach dropped. It seems we've all been witness to a fascinating social experiment. Mr. Kang Seojun made a rather interesting wager with several of our guests. Could his housekeeper survive an evening among Seoul's elite without exposing herself as completely out of her depth? The silence that followed was devastating. Every eye in the room turned toward me, some curious, some pitying, many gleeful at the promised humiliation. This is where I went from housekeeper to unforgettable. Here's exactly what I said. I stepped away from Seojun's protective presence and moved toward the center of the ballroom. You want to know if I knew? My voice was clear, unwavering. I figured it out halfway through the evening, and yes, it hurt. I turned slowly, meeting the eyes of the people around me. But here's what I learned tonight. Belonging isn't about blood or bank accounts. It's about how you treat people when you have nothing to gain from kindness. It's about whether you use your power to build or to destroy. I paused, letting my gaze sweep across the glittering crowd. And by that measure, most of you don't belong here either. You've just convinced yourselves that cruelty is sophistication and that wealth excuses contempt. The ballroom had gone completely silent. So yes, I was a pawn. But the game being played wasn't the one any of you thought. Because while you were all testing whether I could pretend to be like you, I was discovering that I never want to be. Then I walked, head high, spine straight, toward the exit. I didn't look back to see if Seojun was following. Because for the first time in 2 years, I wasn't waiting for permission to exist. I lost my fear in that moment. Then I learned this. Seojun caught up with me on the marble steps. Wait. I paused but didn't turn. I need to go home. I know, I'm taking you. He moved to block my path. But first I tell you that what you just did was the bravest thing I've ever witnessed. Here's where it gets crazy. And that I've never been more certain that I'm completely, catastrophically in love with you. My breath stopped. What? Here's what nobody tells you. Sometimes the most powerful men are the ones most terrified of being vulnerable. I'm in love with you, Seojun repeated. I have been for months. Every time you walked into a room, I felt it. Every time you smiled at something you thought no one was watching, I felt it. You can't just say things like that. Why not? Because I work for you. Because this is impossible. Because you're afraid. His voice was gentle. I know. I'm terrified too. Behind us, guests began spilling out of the ballroom, some heading for their cars, others lingering to gossip about the evening's drama. Seojun's jaw tightened. Come with me. Where? Anywhere that isn't here. He offered his hand. Please. I looked at that outstretched hand, elegant, dangerous, offering something that could destroy me or save me. Then I placed my palm in his. This is where everything changed. Here's what happened. Seojun took me to a private loft in Hanam-dong, a space I'd never known existed. Unlike the cold perfection of the penthouse, this felt lived in. Real. I bought it 5 years ago when I realized I was losing myself in the role I'd built, he explained. But wait. What he said next made me realize this wasn't just about tonight. Tonight, watching you refuse to perform, refuse to apologize, refuse to be anything other than exactly who you are, it made me realize how exhausting it is to always be performing. So stop, I said simply. It's not that easy. Isn't it? I stepped closer. Right now, there's no one to perform for. Just you and me, and the truth. So tell me the truth, Seojun. What he confessed next changed everything. Because you're the only person who's never wanted anything from me except basic human decency. Because you look at me and see a man instead of a money printing machine. His thumb traced my lower lip with devastating gentleness. Because I've built an empire on control, and you make me want to surrender everything just to see what it feels like to fall. I'm still your employee. Then you're fired. What? Here's where dignity became power. As of right now, you no longer work for me. I'll pay you 6 months severance. I'll write you a reference that will get you any position you want. But I can't keep pretending that what I feel for you is appropriate for an employer. You're serious? Completely. His hands framed my face. I want you, Roxanne Williams. Not as my housekeeper. As someone who chooses to be with me because she wants to be. Here's what nobody tells you. The most romantic gestures are the ones that remove all excuses for why something can't work. That's the most romantic thing anyone's ever said to me, I whispered. That's the most practical thing I've ever said. The romantic part comes next. What's the romantic part? Instead of answering, he kissed me. 3 months later, I stood in the same ballroom where I'd been publicly humiliated. But this time, everything was different. This is how I went from housekeeper to cultural consultant in 3 months. My business had exploded after that first night. Apparently, telling Korea's elite exactly what they needed to hear instead of what they wanted to hear was a highly valued skill. Park Tae-min approached, looking uncomfortable. Miss Williams, I owe you an apology. But wait. This is where forgiveness became power. That wager was cruel. Unnecessary. He met my eyes directly. You handled it with more grace than I deserved. I'm sorry. Apology accepted, I said simply. Though next time, maybe just have a conversation instead of orchestrating public humiliation. He actually smiled. Then Hwang Yuna herself appeared. Miss Williams, a word? What she said next proved that sometimes the cruelest people are capable of change. What you did that night, the speech you gave, it was the most honest thing to happen in this ballroom in decades. Thank you? Don't thank me. I was cruel to you. Yuna's expression was vulnerable, but watching you refuse to be diminished, it reminded me of who I was before I let this world make me hard. She told me about her daughter, about trying to be better, about the possibility that people can change. 6 months after that second Eclipse Summit, everything had changed. My consulting firm had expanded. SEO June and I had moved into the loft together, making it truly ours. And tonight, he had something important to ask me. But wait, this is where the story comes full circle. I found him on the terrace with candles and an elaborate dinner. You're using that absurdly expensive dinner from the auction, I said. Seemed like the right moment. He took both my hands in his. Do you remember what I told you that first night? That I wanted to spend the rest of my life proving you were the best decision I ever made? Then he dropped to one knee. This is how a cruel wager became the greatest love story. Roxanne Williams, Seojun said, pulling out a ring. You walked into my life as someone I was supposed to overlook. And instead, you became the only thing I can't stop seeing. Marry me. Not because it makes strategic sense or because it looks good on paper. Marry me because I want to wake up next to you for the next 60 years and still discover new reasons to fall in love with you. Yes, I whispered. Absolutely yes. Here's what nobody tells you about dignity. It's not about where you stand in the world's hierarchy. It's about how you carry yourself when they try to break you. And sometimes, if you're very lucky, it's about finding someone who sees your strength and falls in love with it instead of being threatened by it. We stood on that terrace, looking out at Seoul glittering like promises. Two people who'd been brought together by cruelty and had turned it into something beautiful. But there's one thing I haven't told you yet. One secret about that night at the gala that changes everything you think you know about this story. The real reason Seojun raised the stakes on that wager. The conversation he had with someone before the gala that made him realize what he was really fighting for. That story? That's coming in the next video. Because this isn't just about one night that changed everything. It's about the 2 years before it. The moments I didn't see. The decisions he made when I thought I was invisible. And trust me, when you hear that part of the story, you'll understand why sometimes the cruelest seeming choices are actually the bravest acts of love. If this story made you believe in second chances, redemption, and love that transforms everything it touches, subscribe now